to this media conference with Gareth Southgate to reflect on today's 2022 World Cup qualifying draw. We'll shortly begin with Kaveh Solokol from Sky Sports News, but as ever, please raise your virtual hands as and when you do have a question, and please remain on mute at all times, only unmuting yourself to ask that question. So Kaveh, when you're ready, get us underway.
First of all, Gareth, on paper, that looks like quite a favourable draw. What's your reaction to it?
Well, the nature of the draw is always seeds from different pots. So I guess everybody is going to have that mix of teams. Poland are obviously a very good side. Hungary just got promoted into the Nations League top division. So those two in particular are going to be games that we know will be tough. And the rest are always games, whenever I've played for England or managed England, complicated games to navigate. So, yeah, inevitably it will be about what we do. But some exciting, Poland at Wembley and Poland in Poland. I mean, there's a great history of that fixture. There was a spell when we seemed to draw them every time, wasn't there, over the years? So a couple of good historic fixtures with the Hungarians as well.
I was just going to ask you about those games, because there's so much history in this group. You mentioned the game against Poland in 73, the match of the century against Hungary in 53, and also the game against San Marino. I think it was in 93 when San Marino scored after 8 seconds. I just wondered how much you knew about those games or how much you'd read about those games.
Yeah, well, sadly, I remember some of them. So I'm old enough to be in that bracket. The Tomaszewski game is obviously a legendary one in England football history. As is the Hungarian team. I've heard about those games, and they were one of the leading nations at the time. They've got some very good young players coming through, actually. So they are a nation that had some good results in the last European Championships, and had a good campaign in the recent Nations League. So, all of those nights with England are the opportunity for countries to make history. And whenever England play an opponent, it's always an opportunity for those opponents to not only play well to try to beat England, but also put themselves on the map with Premier League clubs as well. So there's always lots of incentives for our opposition.
And also, looking at the group, I suppose one of the positives is that when it comes to travel, you don't have too many sort of long distance journeys.
Well, your geography is better than mine, Kaveh. I haven't worked that one out yet, but I think we're just mindful of we're looking forward to the opportunity to qualify for the World Cup. We had such an incredible experience 2 years ago, and I was out in Qatar when Liverpool were there for the World Club Championship. The stadiums are going to be incredible. It's obviously going to be a different experience having it in the winter, but the impression I got and the way that tournament was run was excellent. So that really actually excited me ahead of going into the qualifiers.
And just looking at some of the ages of your key players in Qatar 2022, of course, presuming that you qualify for the tournament, will they be at their peak? Sort of Harry Kane will be 29, Raheem will be 27, Marcus 25, Jack Grealish 27, and then you've got the young players. For instance, Phil Foden, 22, Jude Bellingham, 19. Do you have a good blend of experience and youth looking that far ahead?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think even in 2 years' time, I think our last qualifiers, we had nine players involved who could play for the under-21 still. So we are an incredibly young group, which means that for 2, 4, 6 years' time, with some of the other players that we know are coming through the system as well, there's huge potential. But of course, we've got to keep winning in the present as well. So I think we have got a nice balance of that. I think that balance has been a little bit young in terms of winning up to this point. But the next few years, that is very, very exciting for sure.
And when you look at the amount of games that you're going to have next year, Jurgen Klopp said a few days ago that, a lot of the players in your squad were going to be playing 3 times a week, and you would basically have to deal with it, and it was your problem and the FA's problem. Are you worried about the workload on your players, and can you understand where Jurgen Klopp is coming from?
Well, I think all coaches are concerned about the number of matches. I've spoken about this over the last few months, really. It's not one area in particular, it's the overall volume of everything. We're in a shortened season. Everybody has tried to cram their fixtures into a shortened period. So no winter break, which was deemed to be a good idea last year. We don't have it this year. We've got the issue over the substitutions. We've got the issue over all the various competitions that are in place. So we've known that, when the debate comes up, these are things that we were on to how difficult September was going to be as soon as the Premier League started again, because we knew we'd have clubs in Europe till the end. We knew there'd be a short end of season, and we knew we were going to be playing in pre-season. But everybody else kind of comes to that decision more publicly a bit later. Jurgen will be like me, looking at what does March look like, teams at the end of the Champions League, teams going for the league title, another 20 league games underway. So I think we're all conscious that for the top players in particular, they're the ones that play European football, international football and league football. What we've tried to effect is we lobbied with UEFA for 5 subs for the Nations League, which I think was a good decision. I know that there's talks about the FA Cup going that route. So they're the bits that as an FA we can control. I would think Jurgen would be frustrated because in Germany, the DFB and the Bundesliga work so closely together on those things. We don't have that power on fixtures with the Premier League, and we don't have that power on the substitutions. But I see the logic in what he's saying, and I think from a national team point of view, of course, a compact season like this is always a concern, what you're going to get at the end of it.
Of course, you're not going to see your players again until March. The country is still dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. There are different tiers and restrictions in different places. How important is it for your players to respect those restrictions? Because we've seen in the papers in the past few days, there have been some reports of players going out to dinner with their friends. What would be your message to the players in the England setup?
The details of some of those stories I'm not clear on, but the fact you're asking me the question is because when you're an England player, there is another level of profile that comes with that. So I think all of our players that were with us in October in particular, that was a discussion we had. When you go into the next camps in March, going into a tournament, you want as little noise as possible around the team. And the fact is that the distractions off the pitch and some of our discipline on the pitch were quite costly for us in terms of qualifying from the Nations League. I think we hindered ourselves in those instances. So that's something that we're very mindful of as a team and as a group of staff.
And the final one from me about racism in football. I just wanted to ask you your reaction to what happened this weekend, where we've seen players being booed for taking the knee.
I think I'm very clear that the decision of all players and staff at clubs up and down the country has been one of solidarity with teammates, one of solidarity with black people in society. Not in any way have I viewed that as a political statement, and I don't think anybody else that has taken that gesture has viewed it that way. So if there has been any sort of misunderstanding about that, then I think we can be very clear from here forward that isn't the case. I was at Anfield and the crowd applauded the gesture, so thought that was a fantastic response, and I know that happened at some other clubs up and down the country as well. So they're the sorts of reactions that I think give you hope and hearten you.
Thank you, Carve. Next, we'll go to John Murray from BBC Sport.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, John.
Were you pleased to be kept apart from the other home nations?
Well, the whole home nations games are always a double-edged sword, really. They are brilliant occasions to be a part of, as long as you get a result. So, they're games the fans love. The quality of the games are good. But look, we've got Scotland next summer, so that's something that everybody is looking forward to. And the group we're in is one we've got to navigate some different trips, a couple of countries I've not been to. So that's always of interest to me personally. But we've got to be at our best. Only the group winners go through as of right. So we've got to be on our game for all of the matches.
And would you rather have been in a 5-team group?
Doesn't matter, John. We'd have had to play fixtures. So we might as well play qualifiers, I think.
Does it make it complicated this time, the fact that these qualifiers are going to be either side of a tournament?
Well, it is unusual, and it means that you're involved in a couple of competitions, but frankly, I wish we were still involved in 3. You know, when I look at the Nations League semi-finals, they're such appetising games that I'm still annoyed that we're not in them. From our perspective, you only get rare opportunities to win anything at international level. So to be in more than one competition at a given time is no drama. Our focus for March has to be to make sure we're in a good position come September in the qualifying groups for the World Cup. And then we can turn all of our attention to the Euros, although obviously we're still doing a lot of planning work for those in the background.
And I know you'll have to wait to see until how the fixtures pan out, but would you actually prefer to play the stronger teams, if possible, in March as a preparation and a help to prepare for the Euros?
Well, look, we'll get what we're given tomorrow night, John. So we'll wait and see what that brings. There's pros and cons to all sorts of different scenarios, but we can't decide that.
And so, just give us a final overview. You know, when you look at that group you've been handed, what are your emotions? What are your feelings?
I think we ended up in the top 3 seedings from teams sort of at the top end of those seeding brackets. So probably as difficult as anybody could have had, but we're confident about the team. We're confident about the way we're improving. So we've got huge belief, but we know that every game we play is a massive game for the opponent. There's great history of rivalry with some of these games. And we're not naive enough to think that any of those games, home or away, are going to be walkovers. There are stubborn opponents there that have shown that down the years. I can picture games against all of those teams in the past that have been really difficult for England teams and England managers. So we'll be very conscious of that in our preparations.
Thanks, Gareth. Good luck with it.
Thanks. Cheers,
Thanks, John. We'll go to Faye Rutherford from TalkSport next.
Hi, Gareth. Nice to see you.
Hi, Faye.
How much does it help having 3 competitive fixtures again going into the Euros, regardless of the opponent?
Well, I think for us, any games are a brilliant opportunity to work with the players and to improve. We don't see the players now for the best part of 4 months. So to get the players together again, given we're a week or more less preparation for the Euros than we would have been, to have that period together in March is very important for us to get everybody together, to get on the training pitch, to get them thinking about England again, and to have some matches that can help us to improve as a team.
John mentioned there about, perhaps some of the stronger teams, it would be better to play them in March ahead of the Euros. I'm thinking specifically about Poland and Robert Lewandowski. It would be good to see how your defenders handle a world-class player like that.
Well, he's a fantastic player for sure. And, he's as a good a number 9 as there is, him and Harry and Lukaku. When you think about number 9s around Europe, they're 3 that immediately come to mind. So he's a player that can hurt you, and his goal scoring record for his country is phenomenally good. So that's a challenge we'll face at some point. But yeah, let's see what the fixtures throw up tomorrow.
It's been 10 years since you faced Hungary, though. You talked about the young players coming up through their ranks, but what else do you know about them and the threat that they pose?
Well, at the moment, I haven't had a chance to study in too much detail. I just know that I followed some of their games in the last Euros when I'm pretty certain they were in Portugal's group, and there were some dramatic games they were involved in. They were very exciting to watch. So they will be a challenge. I've always got Trevor Brookings' goal in my head at the NEP Stadium stuck in the stanchion when I think of Hungary. There are some interesting developing countries around Europe with good young players, and Romania were another one that our under-21s had a really tough game against last championship. So when you were going through those seeding pots, although there are some countries that our fans might think haven't been strong for a few years, some of those teams are on their way back, and they're always interesting to track.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you make, actually, because, the initial thoughts when that draw was made was one of excitement and confidence of qualifying for sure. What were your initial thoughts of that? Did you get a little bit of confidence from it?
Oh, I think we're confident about where we are as a team and the progress we're making. So the opposition is the opposition. We've had to be prepared. We've had, with the 2 Nations League competitions, more high-level fixtures over the last 3 years or so than you would normally have. And every time we've played those games, we've found improvement, and we've found out about the teams, and we've found out about individuals. So we're not fearful of high-level games. But equally, we know that those games against the lower seeds are complicated games, 8, 9, 10 men behind the ball, and difficult pitches sometimes, difficult journeys. So, yeah, I'm experienced enough travelling around Europe at club level and international level to know all of the pitfalls that can come.
Just finally, when do you start properly preparing? I know that you find out tomorrow who you'll face in March. Is that when the preparation starts?
I would think by the time I get back up to my computer, those games will have landed from our analysts, and we'll be working our way through those over the next few weeks. We've got obviously our Euro opponents to prepare for as well, a lot of planning. Tournament planning is a big operation, for all of our staff, not just the coaching staff, but every department at the FA. And of course, this at the moment is a very fluid situation, so we've got to be prepared to make changes that are necessary. There's a lot going on internally.
Thanks very much, Gareth. Have a nice Christmas as well.
Thank you, and you.
Thanks, Faye. We'll turn to some of the raised hands, starting with Jamie Gardner from the Press Association.
Hi there. Thanks, Gareth. Just a quick one. Looking ahead to March, how hopeful are you that those first qualifiers could be in front of fans, and could it be an ideal opportunity to pilot a larger crowd at a ground the size of Wembley, do you think? I
was at a game with no fans at the weekend and a game with 2,000, and it was great to walk up to the stadium when the players were out warming up, pre-game, and hear the reaction of the fans from outside the stadium. It was lovely to, you forget those small things as you're walking up to a stadium. So, and again, the games I watched on television, the crowd made a big impact. It was amazing how 2,000 fans could make such a difference to the experience of watching. So we're all hopeful of that. all being well, I hope all of those games passed as they were supposed to at the weekend. It seemed from the clubs as if they were happy with the logistics of that, and let's hope that we can increase those numbers gradually and prove that can be done safely and securely, and access and all the complications of it, and coupled with positive advances about the vaccine. We're all hopeful, aren't we, that next year will look a bit different for us.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Cheers.
Thanks, Jamie. Next we'll go to Carrie Brown from BeanymanSports.
Gareth, I know you take a lot of information from all the different codes of sport. Clive Woodward, when he won a World Cup for England in 2003, said a part of his success was getting all the clubs together that had international players that were seen to have very, very straight views, focused on themselves and their success, and said, I need you with me. This is our best chance in generations to win a World Cup. With it happening at the end of the year, this means your players will be fresher than they would have been coming from the back of a league in the summer. Realistically, with the Premier League and how competitive it is with the Champions League, can you do that?
Get the clubs together in the hope that they'll be, it's a lovely idea, Carrie, but I have to live in a pragmatic world and a world of reality. So I totally understand. We have the most intense competition at the top of our league, and some very, very successful managers who have huge motivation themselves. All of our clubs with huge motivation wherever they are in the league, and huge responsibilities. And of course, nearly all of our squad playing in England, which is different for so many of the other countries. A lot of the time they're bringing players back from our league, and their decisions aren't challenged or questioned as much, and a lot more things go under the radar. So our league is just very different. It's one of the additional situations as the England manager you have to deal with. But yeah, I think it's always important to have good civilized relationships with the club and respectful relationships. But the reality is that our objectives are always slightly different. And if you're a club manager, you never want to lose your players to international football. And I totally understand that. And as an international manager, we have so little control for the majority of the year, and we have to be respectful of that. They're the club's players. So it's important for us that the players stay connected, that they feel and understand that they're an England player all the year round, and that we keep that connection and that fire lit, because that's, they do want to be England players as well. It can be club and country, but not so easy to get multinational group of managers on the page about England winning, I think.
I also want to look to March, and particularly your last match at Wembley. Could you tell me what you said to Harry Kane as he came off the pitch? Because you praised him for really leading that side and getting them to that powerful win.
Yeah, I just think that not only are his performances for us strong, but his leadership is improving all the time, and he's growing with that responsibility, and he's recognising the moments where not only his voice, but his mentality and his attitude to training, and how he's responding and interacting with the other players has a huge effect. So he really is growing as a captain, growing as a leader. It's not an easy thing to do, Captaincy is something which is learned, and leadership is something which is learned. But he has lots of natural parts of that, which he does without even realising. But I thought in the last few months in particular, he really stepped up in other areas, and we finished with a really strong performance, a lot of young players on the field, and they look to him. He's an inspiring person to play for and to play with.
I'd also like to look to the draw against Hungary and that team of the 1950s, the golden team. Arsene Wenger once told me that when he'd finished his studies, he backpacked to Hungary to find out all about that magical time. How much have you looked into it, and how much do you know of that golden team?
Well, I know of them. I've not gone to the lengths that Arsene did, but that particular game is one that is a bit of a legend of eras gone by, isn't it? Decades gone by. So, and the tactical evolution of the game, in those days it was 5 forwards and 2 defenders, and very interesting how teams set up. In actual fact, sometimes when teams are attacking now, you do see those patterns on the field. So maybe the game hasn't actually changed as much as we think in some ways. But I always think it's fascinating when some of those countries who were really strong are on their way back, and the journey of the Hungarians is a very interesting one at the moment.
And just finally then, going back to my first question, Clive Woodward's argument was a lot of our players in England make up your team. If they become world champions, they become stronger, greater players. Do you think you could level that to them?
Look, I think that's as it should be, but the reality is the dynamics of the club game in rugby are very different. They rely on their funding from the RFU. The biggest thing financially is international rugby, international crowds. It keeps everything going. The RFU is the biggest in world rugby, and they have the most players to pick from in world rugby. They have more players than any other country. So our landscape is very different. There's international football is strong. Champions League football is strong. Premier League football is strong. So there is a different political situation there that we do our best to try and navigate, but it makes our life more difficult. I think Arsene Wenger over the years said it's very difficult to have a successful national team here and the strongest league. We're trying to do that, and we'll continue to try to do that.
Thanks, Kerry. We have 3 questions left to finish this section of the media conference, starting with Dom Smith from englandfootball.org.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Dom.
Just a question about the lower end of the group. Do you think there are many opportunities to learn from these kind of games with like San Marino and Andorra? I mean, England have played those 2 opponents a combined 10 times before and scored 53 goals. So what do you make of that?
Well, we had games in Malta in the last qualification group that we ended up scoring 4, but 3 of those were really late, and you just never know how the flow of those matches is going to go. It was the same when I was playing. So there's always an expectation you roll those teams over. But my experience tells me those games are tough. So they are different sorts of experiences. I'm not going to look at those games and say we're going to use those particularly to experiment, because frankly we've played young players against some really top teams, and going back to Brazil, Germany a couple of Novembers ago, we've dipped young players into every level of game. So I just think that first and foremost, World Cup qualifiers you have to win. The objective is to get to Qatar. That's where the honey is, and the process of the qualifying is one that you've got to get through. If you can play well and score goals and entertain, fantastic. But first, we have to win the matches.
Thanks, Dom. Next, Ed McCambridge from 442. No, seems to drop off. Ed, are you there?
Hi, Gareth. Ed here from 442. I actually wanted to ask you about Wayne Rooney. He's just obviously become the interim manager of Derby. Obviously an England legend, and his goal at some point hopefully will be to move up in management and perhaps even one day become the England manager. And I was wondering if you had any advice for him or any comment on his role at Derby.
Well, all I would say is if he ever needs any help, we're here to help him. With lots of people at the FA, we recognise that to help all young English coaches is something we're keen to do. I also know Liam Rossini there, who's also involved behind the scenes and is a young coach who I think is very promising as well. So we're just there to support if needed. Basically, we want English coaches to do well. It's great to see Frank and Stephen doing so well in the roles they've got. They should all have ambitions to be sitting where I am. And, I'm sure there's lots of them that are going to be capable of doing that. Scott Parker, another ex-player, but it's not just about the guys that were players as well. There's other English coaches like Graham Potter, like Eddie Howe, like Sean Dyche. We want to help them wherever we can, and we're here to do that. Thanks, Ed. And we'll finish the live section of this media conference with a question from Rob Harris of AP.
Hi, Gareth.
It's a great act, that, Rob. I don't know, that ventriloquist thing there. Clever.
That wasn't my dog. Obviously, you focused down qualifying, but are you starting to look ahead to the tournament in terms of, are you going to look at trying to arrange friendlies or take part in any sort of mini tournaments at all in Qatar to get experience playing out there?
We had some plans to do that, but actually some of those plans were for next March, and obviously that's gone now. So we don't know whether that's going to be possible. Having been there, I'm less concerned about that because I think climate-wise, we're not going to have any difficulties adjusting at the time of year. So I'm less worried about that from an experience point of view. It's always nice to go if you can, but we weren't able to do that ahead of Russia, and that was absolutely fine. And I'm not certain that the calendar is going to lend itself to that opportunity, really.
Thanks, Rob. That concludes the live section of this media conference. Now we'll move on to a short section which is embargoed until 10:30 p.m. this evening. So raise your hands as and when you have a question, and we'll start with Henry Winter from The Times.
Hi, Gareth. No, you're safe. Gareth, just a quick thing on Lewandowski. What sort of threat does he pose?
Well, he's an incredible finisher. I love the way he plays. He's got excellent all-round game. Really good at protecting the ball, bringing others into play. But his penalty box play is the standout. Really, all different types of finishes. So he's been at top clubs, for the last 10 years or so. Top end of European football, great experiences, huge talisman for Poland. So it's a great challenge for our defenders to come up against centre forwards like that. That's possibly why defenders find him difficult to mark. They don't face that sort of challenge so often.
Thanks, Henry. Sammy Muckbell from the Daily Mail.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Sammy.
I'm taking my hat off. I'm not Calvert-Lewin. Can I just have a follow up on the Grealish question, please, Gareth? And just in terms of discipline, you've spoken frequently about it over the last three camps. Obviously, going into Christmas, there might be temptation for some players to go out and maybe break regulations, but also moving forward in terms of the squad. How much credence do you actually give to those issues, off the field issues of discipline, in terms of when you're naming and finalising your squads?
Well, first and foremost, I would think every club is going to want to minimise the problems that they will face, because I'm assuming that if there are issues, they're going to be club issues in the first place. On a broader level, I mentioned the responsibilities of being an England player. That carries a lot of weight. If I read a headline, it's normally somebody's an England and whatever player, rather than the club is at the predominant name on that list. So that shows the change in landscape for any players involved with us. And as I said earlier, when you're going towards a tournament, you want as little noise as possible around the group. We want the country to connect with the team. We want the country to feel excited by the team, but also proud of the team, and that they're good ambassadors for everything we're trying to do. So, of course, we look at reliability as being part of the criteria. On-field decision-making, often that can be reflected in some off-field decision-making. So I'm not going to say it's this is the line, and anybody that crosses it we don't consider, because there's so many nuances to having to deal with different issues. But we're always observing. We're always observing how players look after themselves, how professional they are, how will they be if they're away with us for 35, 40 days next summer. All of those things have to come into our thinking, really, when you're taking a squad away.
Thanks, Sammy. Next we'll go to Charlie Wyatt from The Sun.
Hey, Gareth.
Hi, Charlie.
It's looking to be quite an exciting season with so many teams at the top. Could that benefit you with so many players at clubs? Because it's a lot closer season than normal, and potentially 4 or 5 clubs going for the title. So you could have a lot more players than normal. Could that give them an extra edge and maybe benefit you?
I think we always want our players involved in big games. And, when you look at teams that historically win international tournaments, they've got lots of players who've won European trophies or league titles. It's quite an easy thing to map across, generally speaking. You get 1 or 2 outliers to that. So, we always learn more about our players in big matches, latter stages of European competitions, because you're seeing them against the very best. And the best way to judge people is against opponents that are at the highest possible level. So you can see everything about whether they can cope, how they deal under pressure. It's a much easier guide to how it will be with England. So, I think it is a fascinating league season. I mean, there is now starting to be some familiar names appearing towards the top, but you are talking 6-7 teams, not just a couple, which is often the case in some of the other European leagues.
Thanks, Charlie. Jack Rosser from the Evening Standard.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Jack.
Just picking up from the talk around Lewandowski, obviously Poland is the headline and he comes with that. He'll be stacked up against Harry quite a lot. The way he's playing at the moment, the form he's in with Tottenham, do you think as a number 9, and you listed a couple, he's perhaps the best in the world at the moment?
Well, I think it's always difficult to compare players because they're all playing in different leagues, and in the end, you have to prove that in the big games. So that's the challenge. Harry will be delighted with the way Tottenham are going, and he'll be getting a huge lift from their position in the league and the fact they're going to be contenders for the title. So that I'm sure is going to inspire the level of his game. And on a personal level, I'm pleased for him that's the look of the season. And so, beyond that, I think the top players in the end, they win trophies, they win. So, normally that's how they go to the next echelon of how they're perceived or what their legacy is. In the end, you can have some great individual accolades, but to win with your team takes your game and takes your standing within the game onto another level again.
Thanks, Jack. Matt Dunn from The Express.
There you go. There's the mute button. Sorry, Gareth. 2022 has long been seen as the one that England are going to win from Greg Dyke's countdown clock onwards. Is it our best chance to actually finally end all these years of hurt? I know we're trying to win everything that we're entering, but is that where it is going to come of age? And what has happened to the countdown clock?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know where the clock is, and there's a bit more to, a plan to win a tournament than just sticking a clock on the wall. But I think what that did do, in fairness to Greg, was it set a real focus. And if there's a demand from an organisation that you've got to start thinking seriously about, okay, that if that was the target, what would you do as a group of national teams through the age groups to prepare the senior team to be ready for that moment? I think that has guided a lot of the thinking at St George's Park over the last 7 or 8 years, and I think that was a healthy thing. Actually, you need targets. You've got to have goals, and you can work back from them. Of course, a lot of things have just been thrown in the air in the last few months. planning wise, youth tournament wise, financially for the organisation. But we have got very exciting group of young players coming through. I think people around Europe are noticing that. We've got to instill good habits in them. We've got to instill a winning mentality in them. Some of them are now breaking into teams regularly, getting regular top flight football. And some of them are going to be challenging for trophies, and some are already at a young age. So that's really healthy for England moving forward.
Thanks, Matt.
Sorry. Can I just clarify? The last thing I could find on Google about the Greg Dyke clock was Sam Allardyce backing it. But you've had no intervention and not seen it, though.
Well, I don't know that. I'm not sure which Greg Dyke clock we're talking about. There were a couple of famous ones, really, weren't there? So I've not seen that there was a specific Greg Dyke clock in our coaches' room. We have had clocks in there, and we have had countdown clocks. But I liked Greg, but we didn't actually name a clock after him.
Thanks, Matt. Andy Dunn from the Mirror.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Andy.
Can I just ask you how pleased you were to see Mason Greenwood's goal on Saturday, and how pleased you are that he's back in the United squad now, playing football for the first team? And do you envisage him being an important part of these next two tournaments, Euro and World Cup?
Yeah, well, I think with all of the young players we've got, there's huge competition for places. But what you see with Mason, the finish at the weekend epitomises his biggest strength for me. One chance, really, and fantastic touch to put himself in the position and a brilliant finish. And that's what we had seen towards the end of last season, which was why we called him into the squads in September. So with any young players, they're going to have moments where they're really flying and everything's going well, and then they're going to have little dips. And he's got great support at his football club. He's got people that care for him there, and will bring him into the team and out of the team at the right times. And hopefully he'll get a run of games now. At a club like Manchester United, every game is important. So you're always having to perform under pressure. You're always having to perform with high expectations, which is great for their young players because they already have to deal with everything that they would have to deal with England, really.
Thanks, Andy. David Heitner from The Guardian.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, David.
Do you feel that having three competitive World Cup qualifiers in March can really, I know time's really tight before the Euros, but do you think it can really sort of help you sharpen your focus before the tournament and maybe for you on a personal level kind of clarify your own selection?
Well, I think we know now the team we would play if we were playing tomorrow. But we've got 20 league matches before we see the players again. That's an enormous amount of games for players to change where they are form-wise, to come back from injury. We will potentially lose some to injury. So there's still such a lot of the season to be played. That's why we constantly track all of the players and those that are on the fringes of the squad. You'd hope to be, by the time we meet in March, we're only probably 5 weeks away from naming a final squad, 5-6 weeks away. So you would hope that would be what you've got for the summer. But again, there would still be another 6-7 games. So history tells us that unfortunately you might lose a couple in that spell. But we're pretty clear on what our long list would be, what that would look like if we had to name 23 tomorrow, and what that would look like if we had to name 11.
Thanks, David. We have two questions to finish, starting with Miguel Delaney from The Independent.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Miguel.
Given this draw marks the start of the road to Qatar, we're going to see a return, really, of the discussion about the political morality of playing it in Qatar. Whatever about the bidding process, of course, the issue with construction and a lot of how the country is run. I suppose it's almost a kind of two-level question. does it put you in a tricky position, given that you are going to be relentlessly asked about this, especially when kind of human rights bodies issue reports, and they're also going to be your potential hosts? And also, I suppose, what is your stance on it?
Well, you're right. It's I had the same all the way through to Russia, really, and you're always trying to find a balance of speaking to your own beliefs, being true to yourself and the values that you believe in, but also mindful that our culture is very different to Russia, to Qatar, to other countries I've visited. So what's accepted in different countries in different parts of the world is completely different. And when you travel a lot, as I end up doing, you have to try to navigate all of those things all the time. So I'm also, when I speak, I am representing our country. So there's a responsibility comes with that. You've got to be mindful of that. So yeah, I have, of course, I have views on the various topics, of which there are many that are in the background being raised about Qatar, but also don't know, I don't know all of the facts around what's happening there and what goes on there. And I'm very mindful that it's easy to be judgmental without knowing all of the facts. And I think that's something that I feel you have to be very clear on before you make big statements that would potentially have big ramifications.
Thanks, Miguel. And we'll finish with Mark Ogden from ESPN.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Mark.
Just, you've been quite outspoken from the off, really, about the kind of demands on players this season, how difficult it's been with the congested season. I'm just looking forward to the World Cup and the plans for that season. They haven't really been finalised yet in terms of when the season's going to finish, when's it going to start. Do you expect to have an input in that? And if not, do you want one? And how would you like that season to look? Because obviously there's going to be quite a few demands from all sides in that on the players that year.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't know how those decisions will be made. I mean, I spoke before about the missed opportunity I felt, given where that World Cup sits, to juggle the whole calendar, really. UEFA calendar, individual leagues calendars. Of course, with FIFA, we're talking about the whole world. So some countries' leagues finish anyway. You know, we always think about the European season, but other countries operate on different timelines. So where all of those things sit, difficult to say. But I would hope that within all of the discussions, that coaches are consulted. It doesn't have to be me, but maybe coaches of the big clubs, maybe all national managers, whatever it might be. I know Arsene is at the moment heavily involved with FIFA, so I have confidence that he's going to put the right sorts of arguments on the table and think about player welfare, because I know he'll be thinking about that. But generally speaking, a lot of those decisions are made without the input of coaches, I have to say. And it wouldn't be clear to me exactly how all of those decisions join up across the different federations and the different associations, really.
Okay, everybody, that concludes today's media conference. If we don't speak before, here's wishing you all a happy Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, chaps. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.